If you enjoy listening to adventure stories, then you should visit thedihedral.com. You will find stories from other members of the community and read about climbing, life, and the outdoors. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Let's connect and climb on!
Climb on! Roll!
So hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Dihedral. I'm your guest host today, Cody Amakali. Carrot was gracious enough to hand the mic to this group for this panel discussion, so I'll be leading us through. Super excited to be here with you today. Just to set up the conversation a little bit. So Carrot reached out a couple months back and said, hey, I have this idea for a podcast where I want to get a group together to talk about those conversations that we always hear or we will experience as women or femme identifying or non-traditional members of the climbing community that are historically underrepresented, and they're difficult and they're hard and they're uncomfortable, and they make you pause and wonder, have you, the listener, experienced something in your world that makes you go, well, that's not quite right. Where did that bias come from? Where did that experience come from? And how do you start a conversation that's welcoming, inviting, engaging, and transformative for the person that holds that bias, and also for you as you rethink how you engage in a world that is inherently biased? And how do we start undoing some of that trauma and that angst? So I wanted to say thank you to everyone that's here today. I will pass it over to Gaia and let her introduce herself.
Thank you, Cody. Hi, everyone. My name is Clara Rondon, or Gaia. I'm originally from Caracas, Venezuela, and I am one of the people behind the creation of the Dihedral blog and the Dihedral podcast. We started it, I would say, 4 years ago with the intention of creating a forum that would be a safe space for people to share their stories, whether about life, the outdoors, climbing, anything that people would like to share to get the world to know about them. And it became kind of like a fun area where we just share a little bit of everything. It went from climbing to just life and the current issues that are of interest for the overall community. And yes, and I have a little beautiful 7-year-old. I think I always plug him in and throw that everywhere because it's empowering as a mother and a member of the community to highlight that as well. I'm gonna toss it to Jasmine.
Hi, so I'm Yasmin. I'm from Saudi Arabia. So I've been climbing for around 6 years now. I actually started climbing after a divorce that I went through. I have 2 adorable boys. They're twins. So after I got divorced, they were only 2.5 years old back then. And I just wanted to look for something that empowers me, that makes me, think, be independent, be a role model for my kids, and they can see me not only as a mother or just a woman in the house, but more than that, like a hero. So that's what made me go, try different other sports, but climbing was the thing that really was so close to my heart and really inspired me to become a better person for my kids. And being from Saudi Arabia, a lot of people globally think, as a woman, we have a lot of issues and, we can't do so many things. But actually that kind of pushed me to show the world that, as a mother, single mother, and as a woman, I can actually climb and be one of the first Saudi women to climb here.
That's great.
I think let's pass it to Valentina next.
Okay, my name is Valentina. I'm originally from Belarus, but last 7 years I live in Moscow, Russia. Yeah, I've been climbing for 9 years. Also, I'm a programmer, and last few years, climbing is more than hobby. It's a lifestyle for me. Also, I was a kind of competitive climber. I'm the national champion of Belarus in bouldering. Yeah, so I work remotely and climbing most of the time. That's my last step.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's go to Nikki next.
Hey everyone, I'm Nikki Smith, pronouns are she, her, hers. I've been doing for almost 30 years now. I'm a climbing and outdoor photographer. I'm a writer. I've written 5 books to climbing so far. I do a lot of first ascents, and climbing has been, I think, for at least 20 plus years now, the way I've made my income in one way or another.
Wow. Cool. All right. And Liz.
Hi, everybody. So I'm Liz, and started climbing about 7 years ago now. So four years ago, I started an initiative called Climbing Life Kenya to connect Kenyans with rock climbing. And this year, got registered in a nonprofit with a mission centered on investing in the growth of rock climbing for the next generation of climbers in Kenya. I am professionally trained as a quantity surveyor, so my life has been more of construction and construction cost and contract management. I'm happy to be able to bring a lot of what I've learned from that world to climbing to help it grow and get to be experienced by more Kenyans. So I'm also married to a wonderful human being and a mom to 2 girls, 9 and 7, and I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you so much. Wow. Okay. I'm like blown away by this panel even more now. This is spectacular. I guess let's get started with a thread that I heard from all of you, which is your journey into climbing and the evolution that you've seen, not just in the sport, but in the outdoor industry since starting, and what that has looked like for you. So I guess, Nikki, can we go back to you? And I mean, you've seen a lot, and you've seen this evolve quite a bit. What has that been like for you?
Yeah, it's definitely changed a lot. I think in a lot of ways for the better. It's been difficult. I mean, for myself as someone who's transgender, I never thought anyone like me. There weren't that many women that you'd see just out at the crags when I first started. Were not in the magazines very often. When I started working in the outdoor industry, I never saw anyone who was visibly queer. I didn't know of athletes who were out as gay or let alone trans. There weren't any leaders, visible leaders of companies that were out, and it made it really difficult to feel like I might belong. And when we look at a lot of the names, and there's homophobic and racist and sexist names, I'd be out climbing with friends and have to hear a lot of phobia and homophobia, and just like, oh, there's no one like me, so there's no way I'm going to be accepted. And the last 5 to 7 years, so there's been a major change in the outdoor industry. A lot of folk advocating for their own communities and building up some amazing affinity spaces for people to feel like they belong and see someone else like them participating and active and visible. And that's an amazing thing to see.
Nikki, it just really resonated with me. What was that like, your first experience finding an affirming space at the crag? Do you remember that moment?
Yeah, it was hard. Like I first started seeing some of these groups that like, okay, don't look like me. I don't like I fully fit in, but at least there's something. And that was some of the spaces that Shoma Jun created for Flash Foxy and the Women's Climbing Fest. I wasn't out when those started coming out, but it gave me hope that there'd be something there. And then the first time I really spent a lot of time around other queer climbers, it was pretty amazing. It was still hard because it was this climbing fest where 90 plus of them were getting. And so I still didn't fully fit in, but there were a couple trans people, and amazing to finally climb with someone else who was trans.
Yeah, I can imagine that was transformative and exciting. That there also had to be some emotion around that.
Oh,
So
definitely. It's for so long. It's been more than 20 years of looking for someone. I do Google searches for trans climbers, even queer climbers, and just didn't find anything. And now there's climbing groups all over the world that are fitting, who I am. Amazing to see.
that is really incredible. I guess so. Let's continue that theme with what being the first or finding your affinity group or that support network for the first time, not just access but engagement with the community. I want to talk to Yasmin too about your experience entering into climbing as the first Saudi woman. What was that like?
So I wasn't the first Saudi, but we were very few. And in my city where I was, I definitely was one of probably the first. When I started, we were anyway a handful of climbers, but many, of course, they were from around the world, living in Saudi Arabia, or just men. And I just got in, didn't know anyone, got into it. And at first I was very nervous. I thought, as being a woman, they'd probably say, she's so weak, I don't think she can do it. It's not her place. But especially like I was already a mother, expecting something else. That's what I thought. But when I started climbing, it was so different. I was just really part of the group. I felt there was no difference between, genders. They never even commented or even, made fun or just teased about, you can't do that move because you're a girl. Or in fact, no, it was always very inspiring. They were always pushing. There was always that, support. So I was surprising myself. I didn't know, I shocked myself, and I kind of, felt also very disappointed in myself that I thought otherwise, that there will be a lash or they won't accept me. But actually, it was very smooth. So it's always like we sometimes put expectations that are negative more than what the reality is actually. It's more positive, and people want you to be different, or also just see you happy. And we don't focus on that a lot. We always try to be hard on ourselves. So that was something that I experienced, and I was very, I was surprised.
That sounds like a 180 experience from what Nikki described, getting into the sport and finding the community. Well, Liz, how was it for you in Kenya? What was the community like there?
When I first got into climbing, I think I was very excited about discovering a sport that I really enjoyed. I think I had a tunnel vision of the excitement. Like I had this honeymoon phase where I was pushing myself to climb harder, to just enjoy every moment of the climbing. So much so that I think at the beginning I was I was blind to what was around me because I was very fixated on the climbing experience itself. And after I climbed, I think for a couple of years is when I became more and more aware of my surroundings, so to speak. When I noticed the trend of especially people coming into climbing, local people coming into climbing, not sticking to the sport as I did, and I became more aware of I became more curious about the ecosystem, and that's when I think I started noticing the gaps that existed. I think by my experience of finding climbing, or I say climbing finding me, really got me. Nobody was going to keep me away from it. So I overlooked a lot of the things which I came to discover when I moved out of the space and looked, like from the outside looking in, you are able to see, it's more than just the activity itself. There's a lot that play into experiences if if you look at the ecosystem as a whole. And I would say in terms of the community, as you would put it, the climbing community is a very small community here in Kenya. More so expats coming into the country for a short period of time, and a few locals, very few locals are involved. So being able to grow in the sport, I felt like a lot more needs to be done for the sustainable element of it. Looking at it now from the aspect of being a woman, were very few. I would say just because of how the system is, we have very little interaction, I would say. A lot of continued participation is not existent. So at the time I started climbing, I did not find other women who were engaging in the sport. Most who were engaging in climbing would just come for the one time, have fun, and don't come back again. And after now starting the initiative, the Climbing Life Kenya, I was able to meet a wonderful woman who is now my colleague in Climbing Life Kenya, who shared the same mindset of having climbing more accessible to locals here in Kenya. And we pride ourselves being a female-led organization. And one of the things we've noticed, over 80% of the people we've been able to climb with and who keep coming back to climb are women. So that distinction led us to ask the question, why, what is the difference? What's the difference between then and now that we are seeing more women wanting to come back, have this experience and participate in it a bit more, and volunteer and be part of the process? And we did ask some of them, and one of the comments we get is, when you see another woman doing this, the encouragement, the confidence that I can do it, that this is my space as well, is very strong. Climbing with other women is a very strong statement in encouraging other women to take part in the process. So I would say there's so much to be done, even as we have, as Nikki said, affinity groups all over supporting each other. There's still much more that needs to be done to create systems which support growth, not just the participation, but support growth in this sport that we love so much.
No, absolutely. That is so well said. So one of the things that I thought of while you were talking, Liz, was Valentina's participation in the competitive aspects of the sport. And as that gets televised, as that gets shared, as it gets captured for social media, I think that increases that representation. But I wonder, for you, Valentina, as you're experiencing the sport, as you're participating, does it feel performative to you, or do you actually, do you recognize that that's helping demonstrate that other communities can engage in this sport and be not just successful, but be safe and have fun doing it?
Well, so we also have a very complicated situation about climbing in Belarus. So it's still in development, and it needs some money from government, because I was participated in a few world championships and World Cups, but I paid for all taxes, all tickets from myself. So we have no sponsorship, and it's cost a lot, really. I'm happy that I'm a programmer and I can afford it. But yeah, we really need support in our country as well. So this is one of the reasons why I live in Moscow last 5 years, because the climbing development here is better. So climbing gyms are better, bigs, and I have more abilities here. Yeah, but likely I can see that climbing in Belarus slowly, step by step, but developing. So I think after like maybe next Olympic Games, it will be much better because we have talented kids. They are our future. So I think in general, the climbing journey in the world become better and more popular. I'm happy to see it.
Oh, for sure. So has anyone in this group experienced the sponsorship dilemma of like needing the sponsorship in order to sustain your participation in the sport, but also like the visibility and engagement that you need in order to get sponsorship? Does anyone want to speak to that experience? Yasmin?
So basically, it's not for a personal matter. I am managing the climbing federation here in Saudi Arabia. So I can speak as a government point of view. And when it comes to government, budgets are very low when it comes to sports, especially like rock climbing, which is not a mainstream sport, or we could say it's a new sport here. So we always, seek for sponsorship. And now I'm talking as a government person or a government entity looking also for sponsorship. And this is not for individuals, just also for the whole organization. It's very difficult when you say climbing. For a lot of sponsors, climbing is very new. If you are not in the sport or you don't have friends or family in the sport, for them, they can literally, mix it up with other sports. They don't get the idea. They don't see it as a competitive sport. It's still very immature and young and needs time for to become a mainstream sport. And basically sponsors as companies, they still are skeptical, I would say, to sponsor. They don't know where it's going. They don't know the impact it can have for other people, especially, sponsors always not only look at it from a good cause, but they also look at it from, money generating impact. And I think it's also our job to show that it has a fan base. It's growing, and it's nice for sponsors to start doing that because they will be the pioneers in promoting the sport. So yes, it's very difficult even for big organizations to get that. I think it will just take time, and just we as individuals, yes, since very difficult for us to get sponsorship, we as individuals, at least we can market the sport in our own way, in the limits that we have, until it grows so much, like the idea of the sport, where sponsors will start believing in it and would want to inject more, into that sport so it can grow.
What's it like then for nonprofits, Liz? What has it been like for you getting sponsorship, funding, engagement, and I also want to hear from Gaia as well, from like a blog and from a podcast sphere perspective, what that's like. But what's your experience, Liz?
We're fairly young, but I'd echo what Yasmin has said in terms of just the awareness of climbing as a sport, as an activity that has social impact and the potential for growth. The fact that the sport itself is very young and the awareness is very low, especially here in Kenya, means that it's not anywhere even on the list of consideration as a sport. So the curve is very steep. It's very, very steep in terms of where we need to go, and sponsorship or fundraising is something that really has a lot of room to grow in, and it has to really be matched by a lot of awareness to the general public, so that it's not a case where you know about climbing only if someone who climbs, but it's a sport which is known to all, whether you take part in it or not. So there's still a lot of room, work that needs to be done, and it's it's forums such as this that when people get together and get speaking about it from different backgrounds and sharing this information to see how widespread climbing is really permeating all corners of the globe. And that shows it has a lot of potential. And speaking to the work we do, it has a lot of impact as well. Socially, I think that is a given. But if you're going to talk about having the aspect of the monetary value that needs to be seen, it has to be a concerted effort whereby the pioneers are willing to take the first step, because it's a worthy cause. And if we have the critical mass the critical mass happening from all centers of the world, then it will become that much easier for the sponsorships and the fundraising to be achieved by the various entities, whether it's the federations, whether it's a nonprofit, or the individual athletes. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think you made an interesting point that venues and platforms such as this, and then also, Nikki, what you do with your photography, which is just phenomenal and jaw-dropping. I think the media aspect of engagement with climbing is so important, and it can become very one-dimensional. So Guy, I'd like to hear from you. What has sponsorship been like as a media outlet, as a platform, and how has that helped you amplify or hindered you from amplifying those underrepresented voices in the climbing community?
Yeah, I mean, it's a process that can be challenging because, as you mentioned, with any media content or content creation, now it's very metric driven. So it's based on your following, how many numbers do you have, what's the engagement, are you having traction, etc. And it's still I see, and even when we started, that was around 4 years ago to now, it's a sport that, at least here in the United States, has gained a lot of attention. So it has grown in comparison to how it was 4 years ago, but not to the extent where it is a topic that it's completely followed beyond the niche. So whenever you approach for sponsorship, at least on our end for the podcast or for the blog, it boils down to, okay, how many followers do you have? How much engagement are you having? And it's been challenging to actually grasp or get there with sponsorship, because we release episodes or we tackle subjects that are of interest, but to particular members of the community. So it's been kind of a hassle, and that also on us to come up with content that can be amplified and it's of interest to people beyond the ones that are affected in a way or another. So very metric, data driven, number based, which kind of because you want to give the opportunity to these initiatives to expand and reach. So if you leave it to the number, how do you get there without getting the first steps to get there? So it is a process. It's not impossible. It's definitely possible, but it requires some synergy between the ones offering the sponsorship and the content creators.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And what's funny, what strikes me about that, and I think that we'll have to dive a little bit into this topic because I sense passion from the group in this space, is if you have a passion project and it's niche according to whatever the mainstream is in the climbing media right now, it's hard to get that engagement because the communities don't know how to access it. And so access and mentorship become really, really important to the sport in order to see the opening of those access points for individuals. So Nikki, I want to hear about your experience getting into the photography aspect. I mean, you're underselling the photography aspect of your career a little bit. So what was that access point like for you, and what has that done for you in being able to open up the sport to other transgender women and queer community members?
So my father was an amateur photographer, and so I've always been involved in art and photography. I didn't get serious about climate photography until I was in college, and I was out bouldering with some friends, and I blew figure tendons on both hands at the same time on this problem. I wanted to keep going out with friends, so I focused fully on climbing photography. It's kind of grown from there. The sport's changed a lot. I always tried to make a conscious effort to show not just straight white guys in my photography, but because that's how people viewed me, it was often hard to find other people that would trust me enough to let me take photos of them and not just think that I was another guy trying to take advantage of someone who looked different than everyone else. And once I came out, that opened up a lot more opportunity, plus just the change with all affinity groups, and just made it a priority, even more so than before. I decided personally that 75% of what I share has to be folks from underrepresented communities. And so that's a huge thing for me with National Geographic Adventure Instagram account. My images typically, one of those is usually a straight white, the rest are women, people from underserved and underrepresented communities. And it makes a difference. Like, I get people from all over the world now who have heard my story or my work in some way and reach out, and people thought that they were alone are starting to see themselves. And there's so many others, like Irene Lady Lockoff has been doing this for a while, and Tara Kenzar and so many others out there are now finding their platform be elevated. Whereas before they were there, there's been so many people there, they just haven't had the platform until they're more easy to be heard.
So true. And it's incredible to watch this happen in real time. And so I guess I'll just say thank you for the fortitude and the bravery to every single woman here today, for doing it. It's really hard to be the first, and so and whatever, and it can be the first in a small way. So I think that's really incredible. I want to talk about not just you as a climber or you as being a member of like the climbing culture, but also you are a human being existing in the world, and you are coming from very diverse backgrounds with their own set of challenges and right, wrong, indifferent. You're experiencing biases when people just interact with you. And what does that do for you as you are working to break down barriers, as you are working to platform deplatformed people in your groups? Like, what is that like? I guess, Gaia, let's start with you. You have a very varied political background and experience, and my experience of you has been always just loving kindness towards that very hard ideology. Can you speak to your experience in that space?
Sure. So for the people who are not aware, in Venezuela, we have a rough socioeconomic political situation that has torn the country apart for 20 plus years. So politics is a very divisive topic to the point where it impregnates in different aspects of people's life. It has torn families apart. It has torn friendships apart, to the point that it's hard to keep up. I left my country 7 years ago, and it's ever changing. The circumstance in my country, in Venezuela, it's every day is different. So even today, I can't speak for the conditions that people in my country are living today, because it's so difficult to understand how much things have changed from when I left to today. But I always get people question, oh, so what's the situation in Venezuela? Or do you think this will happen X or Y in other parts of the world? And I'm like, it's hard to tell, because every country or every part of the world has different circumstances, whether they're cultural, etc., that can shape the way that things end up happening. political structures and all these things, but I have a neighbor that, and I love it because, again, communication, conversation, whenever you have the opportunity to address a topic, for even as uncomfortable as it can be, it's an opportunity to educate, to teach people, look, this is what is happening, and then you can leave your preconceptions behind or attach whatever information I'm giving you with the conception that you had. I have a neighbor who always asks me, so what's happening in your country? Do you think this could happen? I'm not gonna say where, but I'll say X place. And I'm like, listen. What happened in my country was because of this, and that. This is what's actually going on. You unfold it and come up with. But it's always a struggle because, and I can't speak for every Venezuelan, but I'm talking for myself. That's the constant question. So I'm from Venezuela. Oh, your country is in a dire circumstance. Like, how's your family there? How are you doing? I'm like, I know. I have 4 family members that live there. Are you telling me or are you asking? You know, it's kind of morbid too, to a certain point, but it's getting past that point, and I've learned to embrace it as an opportunity to educate. And sometimes even myself, when they ask me, I'm like, ugh, I don't know. I should actually Google it and figure out what's going on today, because it's probably different than yesterday. And then on a lighter note, another stereotype of preconception that I get here, I reside in Texas. There's a big Mexican community. So Spanish equals, oh, Mexican. And I say, no, I'm from Venezuela. Oh, what's your favorite burrito? And I'm like, what? I mean, I love Mexican food, but no. Or I get, oh, you're from Minnesota? And I'm like, I didn't know Venezuela and Minnesota sounded alike, but I guess I'm from Minnesota. So I get those situations. I laugh it out. And again, it's an opportunity to engage and educate others and yourself.
Absolutely. That's interesting. So I don't think Venezuela and Minnesota sound anything like, but we'll go with it.
Okay.
So I guess continuing on that thread where people can err on the side of macabre, what's it like for you, Valentina? Because I understand that you've been fairly outspoken. What's that journey been like for you?
Well, so I live in Russia, and I bet the mentality here is like so much different between than in other countries, like than in USA, than in Europe. And to be a female climate here is it can be really different. That because as I can see that our community is not very ready for female stuff. Like I was trying to organize the girls only train, and it was super cool. I worked as a coach. I asked my friends who are coaches, so we organized the common girls only training. It was super cool, but I see that how Russian mentality is really not ready for that. I was very inspired by a woman. I don't remember the name, but in UK, it's like the consortium. The women speak about the climbing, alpinism, and they had this like for a few days. I was very psyched and keen to organize the stuff like this in Russia, but as you can see, we're still not ready because yeah, it's still a compliment in Russia to say that, yo, you're strong as a man. Yeah, from you can got this compliment from a boy. Especially, I've got it so many times as a strong climber. I climbed 8 grades in bouldering and in lead climbing, and I was like, yo, man, strong bro, something to this. But I see how step by step, but the girl community especially in Moscow, because Moscow is kind of progressive city, like it's a megapolis. It's maybe like New York, little New York, yeah. And here in Moscow, I can see how our girl community is become stronger. Like we finally understood that the three of power, like girl power, and we go training together. But it's so new for us, so new for the Russian community that I'm sometimes a little bit jealous about how it goes in other countries. But I'm happy to travel around the world and bring this, like the modern culture of girl power in our Russian
Yeah, that's
world.
so true. Why is
Yeah.
it? This is open. I'm just going to open up the floor because I think it's in. Why is it like? Why is that
Why
the
it is like
compliment? Like,
that?
man, you're as strong as a
So-
dude. What? What really? Like, women are strong as hell.
Oh yeah, it's Russia, because this is a trend, like the toxic masculinity in Russia. We're still like very conservative about that. So especially in the other city, not in Moscow. Yeah, it's like the really different world. Yeah, so that's why it's still a compliment.
So I've heard from people that they say things like to flatlanders, to people that like didn't grow up in the mountains or always had to travel if they wanted to participate in this sport. Oh man, so you're just a plastic hound, like you just climb in a gym, or things like that. I wonder if there is, as you are a female in your community climbing, I know Yasmin, you said you actually experienced great mentorship. Like, what did that mentorship look like for you? How did that come to be? Because mentorship is super important to the act of climbing anyway.
So basically, the men actually embraced it. They were very happy with their female partners around. They didn't see it as a threat or, not my place. But something interesting is actually from non-female women that are non-climbers that were very skeptical about the whole, sport, especially with outdoor here. So we're talking here in Saudi Arabia, women really love to look the best, like perfect hair, perfect makeup, everything has to be spot on, the best, nails should be perfect. So for them, as like, but what happens with your nails? That's the first thing they ask me, what, your nail polish is going to be just, chipped? And yeah, it's fine, No, for them, it's like really a thing, oh my God, you're full of bruises. And this comes from women, not for men. Like men don't even care. They don't even notice. But it's the women that put, like, oh my God, you're a climber, I'm sure you have rough hands. So it's that part that I never expected. But in a way, I just, I developed, because I was very self-conscious, very shy, and always wanted to prove myself with everyone, like with the women, the men, and everything. But when I never saw it from the men, I started needed to prove it from the women. I always wanted to look good and everything. But then I realized, you know what? Just for the sake of that, I'm gonna go out, I'm gonna have fun, I'm gonna do what all the girls love to do. But if I have bruises, if my legs are full of bruises that day just because I climbed hard, I don't mind wearing a short skirt and just, show it. So that's something, it took me a while to have like a thick skin about it and just embrace it.
That's fair. Liz, how about you? When you were getting started in the sport, did you find mentorship or engagement with the community important to you developing as an athlete?
Yes, I did. Because, well, you get to learn a lot from those who've come before you. And climbing is very close-knit in that way. So mentorship for me was very important, although I'd say the opportunities were lacking. in that way. So I was able to I take on the persona of a sponge. So whoever I interacted with, I gathered as much information and knowledge that I could. And in that, I was able to learn a lot from different people and take advantage of that. The main hindrance I would say is most people are really focused on their own climbing and want to enjoy their climbing as much as possible. So the mentorship aspect of taking on a newbie and showing them the ropes might be a bit daunting for some of them, in as much as they want to share the information and grow someone else. So being able to gather as much as I could from different people, and I also took advantage of resources that I was able to access through the internet, and a lot of reading as well to grow my knowledge and in climbing, and also climbing as outside and indoors as much as I could. And I would say a lot of it also has to be personal initiative. You have to go out there and seek out the information and seek out the experience as much as you can. You don't have the opportunity of having a mentor figure in the traditional sense of the word. Yeah, so it's mentorship is definitely very important, and it's one of the things, that I felt I lacked when I was starting out. That's one of the ways I give back, by sharing as much information as I can, being able to climb out with as many people as I can who are new to climbing, and get them started on a good footing and give them what was not there when I was starting as a climber.
Absolutely beautiful. It's so true though, right? Like mentorship is a privilege, and access is also a privilege. I think, Nikki, you said something in your intro that I wanted to bring back, because I think we often, as athletes or as supporters of the outdoor industry in general, sometimes we shy away from the conversation. But you mentioned that access was very difficult and continues to be difficult because of route names, and because of homophobic and racist route names, especially in the United States. I guess I want to explore that a little bit with the group, and what that does for you visiting the crag. And if you look in the guidebook and you see those names, how does that impact you and change your perspective of safety in the outdoor space?
It can be tricky. Like a lot of things, it's just a route name. It's no big deal. But if you haven't had experience to this culture, if you're new coming in and you start pulling out the guidebook and flip through and just like, what is this? Does everyone think this way? Then you go to the crowd, people are talking about what they just climbed, and they're using a bad slur or derogatory language and just speaking it like it was nothing. You constantly wonder, like, can I fit in here? Do I belong here? They think the same thing about me. Like they're willing to just say words without hesitation, and in this conversation back and forth, like, are they going to say something to me? And people don't fully understand how difficult it can be when you feel like you don't belong. You have to constantly worry about your safety to get to some of these areas. In the US, at least, these areas are often in rural communities, and you have to drive into these areas. You're seeing visible signs of hate and racism. And you worry when you stop at the gas station, when you go to the grocery store, when you try to get food thing in these areas. Like, is this a problem? Am I going to be attacked? And you go to crag and you still have to deal with that there. It can be really focus and actually enjoy being out.
I think that's so fair. And what I find so shocking about it is when you point that out to the outdoor industry, there's such resistance to change because it's just a name, or, oh, well, it's just always been that way. And that logical fallacy and the lack of diversity as a consequence of that logical fallacy is just so profound to me. Valentina, as you described it, it was like the conservative mindset of, well, you're strong like a man. It kind of bars access in some cases. I guess pulling on that just a little bit, if you had a magic wand, and I want to hear from everyone, if you had a magic wand and you could change one thing today, right now, from the listenership or from other members of the climbing community, what would that one thing be that you would just magic wand it and it would fundamentally change the face of our sport forever?
So basically, one thing which is not gender related, but climbing, especially outdoors, is considered dangerous. You know, there are some risks. And as being a mother, they always think, oh, you know, you don't think about your kids if something happens to you. So it's always like, but, you know, it's not only about you. You have a family. You know, there are other people that love you. And this is where it's not about this. If I am participating in a sport, it does have its risks, but so does driving a car has also risks. So this is something I think we need to understand. It's not about being selfish when I climb. Doesn't mean that I'm not thinking about anyone else, but it just makes me a happier person and it makes me be more positive, and I can actually give back to the people I love. I can be myself. I just feel happier. So why the restrictions? Why do we have to label it as, you know, you shouldn't be doing that if you already have, you know, responsibilities?
That what Jasmine mentioned brings me back to me raising my little son. I was a single mom for 6 years before I got married, and then my husband kind of like emotionally adopted our son. I'm gonna cry, but it's just, when I started racing him, when I started rock climbing, I did it for him, because I said I want him to be able to grow being a confident individual and being secure of who he is as a person. And I thought rock climbing brought that. And the fact that I supported him to doing it showed that I trusted him, instead of being constantly, be careful, be careful. Of course, there were moments on my heart where it's gonna burst out of my chest, but I was like, he needs to do this so he knows that he can trust in himself and his instincts, and that I trust and support him too. And that expands in other aspects of life. So I think my magic wand would be tolerance. People need to be accepting of other individuals and their individuality. And it's so upsetting when you're racing someone, and I'm gonna cry, but it's so upsetting. And then you have people saying, why do you let your kid paint your nails? Or why do you let him rock climb when he's 2 years old? Or why does he do ballet and things like this? And I'm like, because he wants to. He can do hip hop and ballet, or he can paint his nails and play with Spider-Man. And it's so upsetting because people try, like, as parents or individuals or supporting members of a community, you wanna encourage that individuality if it makes them a better individual. And it would be, I think we would live in a better world if everyone approached it that way, like applauding people's individuality. And I'm a mess.
That's so beautiful. Don't apologize. I think that's
every podcast. I'm like, I'm gonna cry, and I end up crying.
No, I think what's so beautiful about that is it's so true, and tolerance is so powerful, because it, like, that individuality is what propels culture forward. And I commend you for standing up for that individuality for your son, because imagine how transformative it would be if we didn't have to fight for the space to be individuals. If we could just be, there would be so much more mental and emotional and psychological capacity to affect change on systemic issues as opposed to individual rights. So thank you for that. Continuing on, magic wands, everyone.
I can go. Yes, I would say, maybe for some context, in our society here in Kenya, it's a patriarchy. It's a very patriarchal society. And that, coupled with the fact that climbing is associated with a certain image, here it's more of a foreign sport. So my interaction in climbing is sort of a classic story of the intersectionality going on. So you're African, so you don't belong, and you're female, so you like definitely don't belong. So it has been very interesting, to say the least, to see how my experience as a climber or being accepted in that space has turned out to be. Doesn't matter how strong I am as a climber, or how positive the work I'm trying to do through climbing is. It all boils down to being defined in that mindset. It's so much so that you'd have other climbers, local climbers, actually saying, "Don't climb with them. Don't climb with her." You know, it's such a cocktail of unbelievable events to see a community fighting against its own growth, simply because the growth aspect is being led by somebody who doesn't quite fit the picture of who a climber is, or how a climber should be in that sort of traditional thinking of how to define who owns the rock climbing space. So one, as a climber and also as a leader within the climbing community, my experiences have been quite, should I say, discouraging. And you really do need to have a lot of sense of purpose in your work, as I've come to see, to be able to push through and continue with the narrative and educating others and putting the message forward that climbing is really for everybody, if you're only willing to give that chance for that growth. So it's important. This is my magic wand. It's important to accept others as they are, more so in the understanding that accepting somebody else's story does not negate yours. It's not a dichotomy of situations where if I agree this is your situations means that I am negating my own experiences. It's good to understand that no matter what your background is, that is your story. And, you know, it doesn't fade by you accepting that someone else has a different story. And it's in accepting that then you are able to grow as a community. Because by uplifting others, you uplift your community as a whole. And that will be my magic wand.
I think that's a good one. We need Valentina's wand as well. So let's go to Valentina next.
Wow. It's kind of hard question for me, but I think that since I was growing in and developing in like a kind of conservative community, I just would really like to bring more awareness and tolerance in community around me. Like, yeah, because it's like under their magic roof, our community, the Russian community around me is like the super local. Yeah, I just really would love to bring the modern like the topics to discuss, the tolerance from other world. Yeah, it will give like the girls, and I think in community in general, only good sides.
I think that's awesome. I hope modernity returns to your space real soon. Valentina, I think that's very important. Nikki, what about you? What's your magic wand?
I think for me, it would be allowing everyone to feel empathy. I think that sometimes is the root of the issues, is that the people just don't have empathy for someone else. They can't put themselves in someone else's place for a while and understand how these things that are happening could affect someone else. And if everyone had that ability to understand, a lot of people have that ability, but they just have developed it or ignore it. And so if everyone could feel that better and understand that better, I think that change a lot of things.
Empathy and tolerance. What a beautiful message for 2021. I mean, for this century, I think. It's so important. Thank you so much. So we're getting close to wrapping up. I just want to take an opportunity to say, is there anything, so each one of you seems to have a passion project and a heart project that you're working on. Is there anything that you want to leave the listener community with today that you want them to know about, if they want to support a project that you're working on, if they want to help bring sponsors to you, whatever we can do, let's amplify each other. So I will start on the bottom left of my screen. So Valentina, is there anything that you'd like to plug for the group today?
Thank you. I will pass. Thank you.
Okay. Yasmin?
So definitely come and climb in Saudi Arabia. I want people to come here and experience the outdoor and just us getting to know each other, different cultures. Even our culture, our climbing culture is very diverse. So it's so nice to always have more people come in and they can see for themselves how it is here.
I am so down. Let's plan a trip. That would be amazing. Liz, how about you? Do you have a
Part two of this panel is in Saudi Arabia.
Oh man, wouldn't that be great? I would love that. That would be incredible. And then we'd have to go to Kenya and Russia as well. And then we'd have to bring you here to the States so that you could experience some of the sandstone and limestone here. Okay, Liz, how about you?
Karibu Kenya, welcome, and climb in Kenya as well. Enjoy our country. It's really beautiful. The climbing here is so amazing. The nature, the experience is just, it takes my breath every time. So feel most welcome to Kenya and climb here. And also check out the work we are doing at Climbing Life Kenya on our website to help grow rock climbing here in Kenya. So climbinglifekenya.org. And yes, most welcome.
Awesome. Can't wait. This is going to be a fun world tour. Nikki, how about you? I know you have a few causes.
Yeah, I would rather let the people listening know that they have a lot more power to help change than realize. Support the organizations, groups, and individuals who are trying to make change. That could be financially, that could be elevating their voices. Support the companies that are doing the work to elevate the voices of people who haven't had that platform in the past. And let the companies know what you want to see. You see one of your favorite climbing companies not promoting folks from underrepresented communities if their athlete team is always the same, have enough women, it doesn't have enough of what you want to see, let them know. Let the climb shops support know. And if you speak up, that can a lot to change things. The climb companies need to hear it, and you can let them know.
Yes, I agree. Let's raise all of the voices. Gaia, how about you? Anything you want to plug?
Yeah, just if you want to read more stories about life in the outdoors, go to the Dihedral blog or the Dihedral podcast. We have different episodes with fantastic people, and just support these amazing women, individuals. They have different causes and have made an impact and a mark in their community and the overall climbing community. So thank you for listening, and thank you all for being here. That's all I want to say. And thank you everyone for existing. Let's do better.
Absolutely. All right. And so what I want to do is I am coming to you from Houston, Texas. And so I am on the Atacapa Ishak Nation ancestral lands. I just want to acknowledge the ancestors and the traditional stewards of this community. And in honor of today's gathering, I will be supporting the Alabama Coushatta Nation, who are the present day stewards of this space, on behalf of each of our panel participants. So thank you so much. The other thing I'd like to plug is find those causes and support them, just like Nikki recommended. Find Liz's organization. Let's try to get the dihedral community together and get Valentina some sponsorship so that she doesn't have to pay her way, and so that she can actually focus on being an advocate for the female community in Russia. And then Yasmin, let's make sure that we try to get some visibility to the government needs to support the sport in your space. And then Gaia, I also just want to acknowledge that we all need to be doing the work and learning about the day-to-day impact of regimes and dynamic political situations, because history is in the making right now, and it is dynamic, and we are able to impact it. So I just want to say thank you, and tell your neighbor to do his own research, and it doesn't have to be COVID research. And then Nikki, I also just want to acknowledge, I know that you're working on a few independent projects, so I'm going to push some traffic your way to your pages and just ask folks to interact with you and help amplify some of those voices that you are so good at amplifying for the whole community. And with that, I guess we will start closing out. So I just wanted to say thank you so much to Dihedral for inviting me to host this panel today. It was such an honor, and I look forward to following all of your careers and seeing you. And hopefully we will have a follow-up that will be like the world tour Dihedral, and go and visit all of these beautiful countries and experience all of these cultures. That would be so incredible. So thank you today. Thank you to the Dihedral listeners. We look forward to talking to you again soon.